Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Make sure to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content. Today we're looking at some brand new cards coming from a mini box within Duel Links. This is the newest one called Sign of Harpies, and these will be the rares. Number 7, Lucky Straight, is one of the number cards. It's a light attribute fairy type Xyz monster, rank 7 with 700 attack and 700 defense. Requires 3 level 7s in order to summon it, and you can detach one Xyz material from this card. Roll a 6-sided die twice, and this card's attack becomes the larger number rolled, times 700 until your opponent's next end phase. Then, if the total roll was exactly 7, apply one of these effects. Send all other cards on the field to the graveyard, special summon one monster from your hand or from either graveyard, or draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards. So this card is first incredibly difficult to summon. It requires 3 level 7 monsters. Yes, you do have cards that have the ability to just normal summon themselves by halving their attack points. I think Fusilier Dragon, the dual mode beast, is an example. That's a machine type that can do that. Originally it has 2,800 attack and 2,000 defense, so both its stats half. And I think there's an insect type monster as well that can manage this requirement. There's probably a few others that you can summon through various ways. The attack stat of this card is originally quite useless, but considering that you're going to be using these effects, you're going to have it for at least 2-3 turns, and potentially you can have a 4,200 attack monster. Or if you've got it at the reverse side of it and you just roll a 1, that's it, you're only going to end up with a 700 attack monster. As for the effects, these can be useful depending on the situation and what you've already rolled. Remember, it has to total 7, so this can be a 1 and a 6, a 2 and a 5, a 3 and a 4, or the reverse of those combinations. And as for the effects, to send all other cards on the field to the graveyard, that's a massive effect. If you can just wipe out everything your opponent has, and if you've barely got anything in the field, to summon this card to begin with, you probably won't have anything else. To wipe out your opponent's cards means if this has rolled a 6, this becomes a 4,200 attack monster if they don't have anything in their hand, such as a Karibo, Spear Karibo, or a Kiteroid. You can direct OTK them with this effect. The secondary ability to special summon a monster from your hand or from either graveyard means, depending on where you are in the duel, you've got a lot of advantage. If you're later on within the duel, you and your opponent will have gotten rid of some of your more important monsters, and you can just bring one of those out. Alternatively, if it is near the beginning of the duel, you can always just take from your hand and use a monster from that. The final effect is quite decent, because you're able to draw 3 cards and then discard 2. This is the exact effect of Graceful Charity, which is a banned card. Even though you are having to get rid of 2 cards as discard, you draw first, which means if you draw into 3 cards and any of them perhaps aren't as useful as you recommended or thought they were going to be, you can always just discard whichever ones you don't want. It would have been a lot more annoying if it had been the other effect, if it had been the reverse, where you had to draw the cards after you did the discard, because otherwise in that, you don't know what you're drawing. FA Motorhome Transport is a light attribute machine type synchro monster. It's a level 9 with 0 attack and 3,000 defense. It requires 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and it gains attack equal to its level times 300. Each time a FA spell or trap card or effect is activated, can increase the level of this card by 1. This card gains the following effects based on its current level. Level 11 or higher cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Level 13 or higher. Once per turn, you can target 1 FA monster in your graveyard, special summon it. So again, like all the FA monsters, this does gain attack points based on its level. Currently, since it's sitting at a level 9, it becomes a 2,700 attack monster right off the bat. The disadvantage of this is if your opponent is able to negate this effect through something like Breakthrough Skill, Effect Veiler, this becomes a 0 attack monster again, and your opponent can just easily one-shot through this card. The ability to just constantly rack up levels is also not difficult. It's whenever an effect is activated, whether it's your own or your opponent's, or even when it's one of your FA cards. So this gains advantage incredibly simply. The first part of the effects, you just have to increase the levels by 2 to have that immunity from destruction or card effects. Useful for just winning harder or actually getting your opponent to a point where they're trying to throw resources to try and get rid of this card, and they just don't have those available. The final part of the effect, getting it to level 13 isn't really that easy to start off with, but once you do, it's a win harder card as well. Being able to just constantly special summon FA monsters means you can just go into further synchro monsters, or you can just continually add to your own advantage. I think this was also the support that came out the same time as that FA Auto Navigator, which was that tuner monster that I mentioned in the previous episode. BES Covered Core is an Earth Attribute machine type level 7 with 2500 attack and 800 defense. Its effect is when this card is normal summoned, put 2 counters on it. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. If this card attacks or is attacked, at the end of the damage step, toss a coin and call it. If you call it wrong, remove 1 counter. If this card battles without a counter, destroy it at the end of the damage step. So this is part of an archetype called the BES. These are all alien battleships that generate counters when they're summoned. Some of them have effects where they can, I think Crystal Core allows you to change one of your opponent's monsters to defense mode. There's another one that when they remove one of their counters, is able to destroy a spell or trap card. And then there are some like this that just have it as a protection effect. So this is just how they work. They were used in the second series of Yugioh GX. I think this was by an Italian pro named Lorenzo, who was obsessed with his computer games. He wasn't truly brainwashed by Sartorius within the series. Within the episode, he only featured in 1 episode, and he wasn't that big of a deal. Jane beat him relatively easily, and it was more because of the combo he used. There's another card called, I think it's Boss Rush, where if you lose one of your monsters, you can just replace with another high-level monster. This is the main disadvantage of the BES cards. I think there's all but one of them is a high-level monster. I think there's one that's a level 4. The rest, you have to either tribute summon or you have to use them through Boss Rush. If you have to constantly use this effect, it's really negative because, you're having to gamble on whether you can actually call, your coin tosses correctly. It's fine if you're pairing this with something like second coin toss or something like, I think Sartorius has an effect with his character ability, which lets him kind of guarantee a heads. So there is a way of maybe pairing that combination. But other than that, it's not a really good archetype to be looking into or trying to use it for a competitive meta setting. Brain Golem is a dark attribute fiend type level 6 with 2500 attack and 1800 defense. The effect is effects of face-up light monsters are negated. If this card destroys a light monster by battle, it can attack once again in a row. I think this is really useful against certain types of decks. You've got some of the light attribute decks. More specifically, you've got things such as Blue Eyes White Dragon, which are a nightmare to deal with anyway. But being able to shut down their effects is really nice. The downside of it is the attack on it is 2500 for a level 6 monster is fine. And the ability to attack twice in a turn is okay. But it can be so easily gotten rid of. And generally speaking, I think it's going to be one of those cards that is going to be forgotten. Dysnops is a fire attribute machine type level 4 with 1800 attack and 200 defense. The effect, once per turn, you can roll a 6-sided die, then apply the result. 1. Look at your opponent's hand. Also discard 1 card from their hand. 2, 3, 4, or 5, discard 1 card. 6. Discard your entire hand. Now, the reason this card is being used within this pack is because we just had the Duke Devlin event, which had him who is, well, he was a friend of Yugi and his friends, except for the time where he was angry. He thought that Yugi shattering Pegasus's confidence had meant that he was no longer able to get his brand new dice monsters into the game and actually build that alongside Maximilian Pegasus. Because of that, that's why he blamed Yugi and actually both humiliated Joey by forcing him into a puppy suit, and also made it so that Yugi had to duel him just to save Joey's dignity. This as a card is fine in terms of, it's okay in stat line, its attack is fine. My problem is the effect is so bad. You've got a 5 in 6 chance of it working against you. The only good result is a 1, to be able to discard 1 card from your opponent's hand. And there are cards out there, I'm thinking of the Dark Scorpions, who can do this a lot more consistently. Continuous trap card called Robin Goblin, who every time your monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent, doesn't matter if it's through an opponent's monster or through a direct attack, can do this more consistently than this card. Chances are, if you land that 6, that wipes out your hand. Even if you run any of the other numbers between 2 and 5, you're losing a card through this effect. Definitely not worth running. Hysteric Sign is a continuous spell card with the effect, when this card is activated, add 1 Elegant Egotist from your deck or graveyard to your hand. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard, because it was sent there from the hand or field this turn, add up to 3 harpy cards with different names from each other from your deck to your hand. You can only use 1 Hysteric Sign effect per turn, and only once that turn. So when this card is activated, you're instantly able to bring your Elegant Egotist back. That's fine if you're looking to resummon your Harpy Lady Sisters, but they're generally a vanilla monster with 1950 attack and 2300 or 2400 defense, something like that. Even though it's a decent enough effect, it's actually the secondary ability. When you wipe this card out, you're able to just add up to 3 Harpy cards with different names to your hand, so you're adding significant amounts of consistency to what you want to do. Definitely something you want to be running at least a couple of copies of. I don't think you'd want to run the full 3 in case you get a cloggy hand. FA Offroad Grand Prix is a field spell. Its effect is increase the levels of all FA monsters on the field by 2 during the main phase only. You can use each of the following effects of FA Offroad Grand Prix once per turn. When an FA monster you control is destroyed by battle, you can discard 1 random card from your opponent's hand. Or if this face-up card on the field is destroyed by a card effect, you can add 1 FA card from your deck to your hand, except FA Offroad Grand Prix. So what I love about this card is it consistently increases the levels of all FA monsters on the field by 2 during your main phase. Okay, it doesn't work during your battle phase, but if they have abilities that work during the main phase, that's always fine. It's a decent effect just on its own. The other ability to be able to just discard a random card from your opponent's hand, depending on how many attacks you get in and how many monsters you are able to destroy of your opponents, means you can almost guarantee to rip your opponent's hand and put them in a position where they cannot fight back. The other effect is actually just a replacement effect. You're always going to get this if your opponent tries to destroy this card, be it through a monster, a spell, or a trap. And actually it's nice that it does synergize to replace itself with something else from your FA archetype. Next card is FA Stop. This is a quick play spell card with the effect target 1 FA monster you control, reduce its level by 2, and if you do, draw cards equal to the number of FA pit stops in your graveyard plus 1. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 FA monster in your graveyard. Special summon it. You can only use each effect of FA pit stop once per turn. Essentially what this does is it just adds to your ability to draw. When you use it the first time, you are just getting 1 draw. If you manage to use all 3 of them, you get a +2, which is fine, but it does require you to run all 3 in order to maximize from its effect. The other problem I have is, yes, you can banish it to be able to special summon 1 of your FA monsters, but the disadvantage is that can only be used during your turn. It would be nice if that had been a quick effect, because that way you could actually respond to if your opponent's trying to attack your life points, or you can use it during your turn to flexibly go into another synchro monster. Now, Boss Rush is the card that I mentioned earlier. It's a continuous spell card with the effect you cannot normal summon or set. During the end phase of the turn, that BES monster or a big core is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one BES monster or one big core from your deck. The benefit of this card is it keeps replacing itself with more BES or big core monsters, so for the archetype you're constantly bringing out big beat sticks. The big problem is that first line of text. Those first 6 card words are the downside of this card. The inability to do anything. You cannot normal summon, you cannot set. You are essentially reliant on that one beat stick you have on the field to do your work for you. If you can maintain that advantage, yes, you're fine. But if you can't, it's a card that will be your ultimate despair, because it will keep locking you out of being able to do things. And in the case of when it was in Yugioh Season 2, when Jaden actually faced Lorenzo, he used his Grand Mole to return it and one of Lorenzo's BES monsters to the hand, and therefore it stopped the ability from Boss Rush from activating. Yet that first part of the effect just destroyed his ability to do anything. Harpy Lady Elegance is a normal trap card with the effect shuffle one Harpy Lady Sisters from your monster zone into the deck. Then you can special summon 3 Harpy monsters with different original names, 1 each from your hand, deck, and graveyard. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except wind-type monsters if this card you control is destroyed by a Harpy card effect or your opponent's card effect. Add 1 Harpy monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Harpy Lady Elegance once per turn. The best thing about this card is, again, it's one of those win harder cards. If you've already got your Harpy Lady Sisters on the field, they essentially split into 3 different monsters. That's kind of the whole idea of how they work. If you look at the original Harpy Lady, there was a Harpy Lady 1, Harpy Lady 2, and Harpy Lady 3, and each of them had their own distinctive effects. I think the pink one had the attack gain effect. I think it was 300 attack gain for any wind attribute monsters. One of them had an ability, I think it was the blue one, where if your opponent destroyed that card with a monster through battle, they couldn't attack with that monster for a couple of turns. And I think the third one with the orange hair had the effect where it can negate effects of any monster it destroys. Being able to do this, you can instantly gain advantage, and you're then able to go into different various monsters. Of course, this lets you go into your Scratch Clash, or you could go into a wind attribute, Exceeds monster if you want. The flexibility and the choice is yours. The nice thing about this effect is it's not actually disadvantaged if you happen to trigger it from the effect of Harpy's Hunting Ground. Actually, it rewards you for doing that. Typically, the problem with mass summoning a Harpy Ladies when you've got Harpy's Hunting Ground is you end up risking losing your own back row if you're not careful. So by being able to be triggered off of that effect, as well as if your opponent destroys this card, to search for one of your Harpy Lady monsters is a decent search in and of itself, and actually helps to run the deck without, being awkward. FA Overheat is a normal trap card with the ability, if only your opponent controls a monster, special summon FA monster from your hand, and if you do, increase its level by 3 until the end of this turn. If this card is in the graveyard and you control no cards in your field zone, you can banish this card from your graveyard, activate 1 FA field spell directly from your hand or graveyard. You can only use this effect of FA Overheat once per turn. So this activates similar to something like a Monster Reborn, but actually something probably more related to a Call of the Haunted, and the advantages you are able to gain that level increase by 3, so that's an additional 900 attack points for your monster. The kind of disadvantage of this card, there isn't really one. It does have to rely on your opponent having a monster and you not to have one, but I think it's one of those cards that's meant to kind of save you if you're in that kind of disadvantaged point. The other benefit is, the FAs rely heavily on your field spells, and if you don't have one, they often get disadvantaged. By having this as a secondary effect to banish it, you simply get to recover one of your used field spells or one that's in your hand, although I don't understand why you would have that in your hand. It would make sense to recover something from the graveyard. Armor Ninjutsu Art of Rust Mist is a continuous trap card with the effect: when a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, if you control a face-up ninja monster, half the current attack of that special summoned monster. This is why the ninja archetype is run and why it has been popular in the past. The ability to half any of your opponent's special summoned monsters, and it's just not a monster, it's monsters. Anything summoned when this card is in effect and you've got a ninja monster means they're all going to be affected by it. It's brilliant and was actually introduced back in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal at the same time as Kaze was in the storyline for it. Like I said, it was episode 16, and definitely a key component for the ninja archetype that is, I don't actually understand why it wasn't introduced sooner. And the final rare is Blind Destruction. This is a continuous trap card with the effect: once per turn during your standby phase, roll a 6-sided die. If the result is 1 to 5, destroy all monsters on the field with the same level as the number rolled. It is 6, destroy all level 6 and higher monsters on the field. I remember having this card and actually getting this card, multiple copies of it. It seems fine as an effect, but actually it's really bad. If you roll into something that there's multiple monsters of a particular level, you're destroying both yours and your opponent's cards. Alternatively, if it does go in your favour, you can wipe out some of theirs, but it's likely to maybe be one monster at best. Or alternatively, it hits none of theirs and it hits all of yours, which is probably the worst case scenario. I consider this to be a worse version of Needle Wall. At least with Needle Wall, it only hits your opponent, and even though it will only destroy one monster if they happen to have one in one of their columns, it's much better than potentially wiping out your own